guys having a great afternoon or morning, and thanks for joining us again. I'm Andrea Hardy, Director of Customer Success here at TOPS. So for our agenda today, we're going to cover how to set up your TOPS 1 to really maximize your efficiency, including some best practices, really utilizing your action table for the entire collection cycle, and then how to accelerate your collection management and cut your processing time. And then the second part, we'll go through how to creatively use reporting to quickly do reviews and post and process your actions. But first, let's review some best practices for really ensuring your collection is set up correctly, and that you cover all the bases of the necessary steps in the cycle. So this is one of my favorite phrases, and if you really think about it, it's true in almost any aspect of our work and our personal lives. By taking the time to verify and set up your collection process correctly in the beginning and really document all the details, you're going to save yourself a lot of time and headache caused by mistakes. And I always think back to a time in my career when something went really wrong. And I could always trace it back to what I call an aha moment, like, oh yeah, that's when it happened, because I realized critical information was overlooked. And my job today is to really help you prevent this, or at least for collection processing. So let's start at the beginning. When you transition a new community, after many failed attempts in my previous management career, I learned two important things. First was to always have a checklist. And the second was to always remember to get sign off on that checklist, because there's going to be so much, chaos during a transition. So utilizing a checklist of all these things, I always say, the mistakes I've made in the past, so we don't make them again, are really going to prevent all of that, hassle and the problems that arise whenever you're taking on a new community. And I didn't realize how many details there really are that need to be verified during a transition, and that if they're missed, well, it's Murphy's Law in action. Anything that could go wrong did go wrong. So having this checklist and utilizing it every time you set up a new community, you're going to protect yourself from things that fall between the cracks and come back to cause chaos and a lot more work for you. So to help you all out, you can find the detailed transition checklist in the handouts. I created this over many years, and really, probably took everything that went wrong and put it in here so that we never experience that again. And one great thing is that the Excel workbook has tabs throughout for different departments. But all you have to do is enter the information on that first page, and it's going to auto-populate to the other areas, so that it just makes it easier not to have to, duplicate information. But check out that and see all the different things that you really need to verify when you're transitioning, just so you don't have to have it happen to you and have to deal with the hassle that can come with not getting all these details correct. Second thing is, I had a challenge with collection processing, in that if you miss one small step, it can really have disastrous consequences. Yeah. How many times do you get interrupted during the day? You were downloading something, maybe a posting deposit, or forgot to apply late fees, and then you find yourself or a manager on the hot seat in front of the board. So quick poll, how many of you have inadvertently missed applying checks or a lockbox download before processing collections? Because if you're like me, I can't say it only happened once. Maybe more than twice before I really learned my lesson. But the great thing is that if you utilize and really stick with having a checklist, it really helps you stay on track with making sure you got everything done. And then plus, if you have multiple people doing different aspects of that process, you can ensure that the checks and balances are complete before the next step is taken. Think of it like a relay. It ensures a smooth handoff from one sprinter to the next. So now that we're equipped with our checklists, you know I'm a big checklist person, let's ensure that you're utilizing your action table to get the most out of your TOPS 1 technology. And this always, you know, when you really think about it, is insane that anyone, you know, how can we expect anyone to process collections when, you know, essentially the amount of time you have to do it boils down to about 4 or 5, 6 days a month at the most, because if you have 2 collection cutoff dates or 3, but most of them fall within the 15th or the 30th, you know, you'll have a few that fall outside of that parameter. I think about it like, it's like a race starts that minute that, you know, that late date hits, and all of a sudden your workload goes from here to here. So before we, you know, jump into the collection action process, let's review a couple of things you need to think about. There's 4 factors really to consider. You know, the first is most obvious, that it's the number of days that the account has been delinquent. But there's some not so obvious ones that you got to consider. You know, taking into account the amount would be the next factor, and this is what we talked about before in the thresholds. So, you know, there's really a need for clarifying and getting direction from your board, your manager, whoever makes the decisions on how much does it really have to be at this stage. Yeah, they're 60 days, but if they owe $5, I'm not really going to move them to an attorney stage. So really get that clarity so that when you're setting up your collection action table, you can really create this perfect little matrix that's going to, you know, be efficient when you go to process. So following after amount, you know, looking at the previous collection actions, because sometimes it's not going to follow a clear path. Sometimes, you know, there's a bump in the road and you're going to have to take that into account. And then, you know, lastly, looking at the accounts on hold and, you know, the ones that are on payment plans, the ones that are on bankruptcy, all these different things can affect where they are in that collection cycle. So with this variety of reasons, you know, we're going to go into detail on how you can manage these much more seamlessly. So let's review, you know, quickly the structure of how the collection table is set up. So when you're creating this action process, there's really these groups of different information that you're going to need to consider. And a lot of times they're not real clear on, you know, what you're supposed to put into that slide, or I'm sorry, that field. So let's go through those. So first is going to be the alias. And let me move this over. The alias is, think of it like your shorthand for quickly, you know, seeing the status of an account when you're looking at reports. So if you create something that you know you can recognize, it'll be a lot easier. You know, TOPS 1 is much better at doing this than our legacy platform because it used a numbering system, which was, you know, I didn't know what a 20 was or a 30 was, but in this, it really gives you the flexibility to set these up and name them yourself. But I can't stress the importance enough of making these standardized if you manage multiple communities. That's going to prevent a lot of, you know, additional work down the line, especially when you're processing across multiple communities. You always know in the back of your head, just like your GLs, you know, make them the same so you always know what a 5680 is or whatever it is. Do the same thing here. Really think out your strategy for how you're naming these. And then, you know, on your actual name of that, I always say, you know, you can use a lot of different options, but I found that using like a, you know, a first, second, and third, you know, first notice, second notice, third notice, you can put a little description of what that notice is, late notice, whatever the terminology is that you all call it. But having that first, second, third makes it easy to put them in order, especially when you're assigning templates and things like that. And I would suggest naming the templates the same thing, first, second, third. It's much easier to kind of line things when you're setting all of your collection action tables up, and just much easier to manage moving forward. And then description, you know, again, coincide with the collection cycle. Minimum days is really important to ensure that the system is going to correctly categorize. Think of it like a matrix. You get it just the way you want it, and it's going to do everything you need. But if it gets off just a little bit, it's a formula, so it's not going to know what to do. So make sure that you're reviewing those minimum number of days from the due date. So if I have a monthly collection apply on the 1st, that's when it's due. It's considered late after the 15th. I know on the 16th or 17th, if I give a grace period, that I can put 15, 16, or 17 days in there, and it's going to automatically look at every candidate and put them into that. The good thing is, if you enter the information incorrectly, you can always go back and edit it. And I've had to do that many times. So if you categorize your collections and then you're like, oh, everybody's in the wrong category, don't spend time going through moving them all. Just go back and change the action process. Think of it as fluid. So, it's a living document that you can edit all the time. That way you don't have to do the additional work. And then the minimum amount, keep in mind too, if you have an association that has varied dues, you'll want to use that percent option instead of the dollar, the flat amount. So the percent option, if you click on that to change it, you can say 10%, 20%. That way, if one person has 100 a month and another 300 a month, it's going to be fair across the board for whether they're 10 or 20 or 30% behind. And that's as far as what the minimum threshold is before you move to the next action. And then admin fee, it's called fee, but this is essentially your administrative fee or any other administrative fee that's charged on top of late fees, interest fees. So don't confuse those with the latent interest. Those are a completely different area. These are for any administrative fees that you want to add. When you process that collection, it's going to automatically add that to the owner's account. And then lastly, oh, and I hit the wrong button. Give me a second. I'm going to back up. There we go. Lastly, the template. These are going to be where your letter templates that you've created are going to be assigned to whatever that collection action is. Really important to make sure that you set those up correctly, and I would highly recommend testing them out before you move on to processing for the first time. So again, let's look at the table in review. I know that I struggled with how to understand how to set these up initially and how to configure them so that they really worked for us. But keep in mind, again, the parameters are fluid and can be adjusted. So before you start any collection period or processing, you can always go back and just do a quick review. Make sure that, hey, if I'm 5 days late in processing these collections, let me edit my late date so that I know that it will always pick up and categorize the people I need to where I need them to be. And then let's go into why this is such a huge time saver. So ensuring that you use the system when you're creating that action table for every action, doesn't matter whether it's an internal action or one that you're having the attorney do for you, using technology to move them through that cycle is so important, and it's going to save you so much time. And we're going to look at why. So most clients don't realize that, aside from the internal collection notices, that you can utilize TOPS 1 to track all the attorney actions and make managing the process a whole lot more efficient. And it's going to be in one centralized database of actions taken. So that way your reporting's correct and it's easy to see the status of every account, no matter who's looking at it. And this was a big realization for me when I was in management. I struggled for years trying to figure out how to manage, where they were in the collection action once it was outside of our office. So by tracking these in the action table, you are able to use the automation to update the accounts en masse. So when you know that it's time to move the account to the next attorney action, you can move those through those stages just like they were, a late notice or another type of notice. And while you're not going to generate a letter with it, you can leave that blank. You're going to be able to post any administrative fees that you charge for that action. I know that we charge for the attorney actions, even though it's with them, we're still doing the work. So you may want to clarify, and I realize this afterwards, when you set that up, you can put like attorney demand, but put attorney demand requested. So that way your boards don't think that, somehow it's already been done. You can just have that status to say that we did this, passed it on to them, and that you've got your bases covered. All right. So now I really want to talk about how to creatively use the action process to also manage special circumstances and other reasons that may delay the collection action from being taken. There's always going to be a situation arise where there's a payment dispute or a number of other odd things that come up and you need to put a hold on the account. But you run into the issue of how do you manage all these with everything else that you're managing. So by creating categories for each type of hold, you can, it's really going to allow you to see and report on specifics of why the account's on hold, why it's at that stage, why it hasn't moved forward. So quick question, how many of you currently use your action table to track these types of situations? Like a temporary hold, a bankruptcy, a resale status, a payment plan. So, one of my very favorite things about the collections area in one is that you can have the ability to create multiple hold categories. So think of these as placeholders in the collections process for all the situations that arise throughout the month. And you need to account for these and ensure you don't move these through the collection cycle without, having that red flag that jumps out at you. So let's take a look at a couple of examples. I'm sure you've all had owners who call after receiving a late notice where the owner disputes the collection action, from my check cleared to I sold that home, why are you contacting me? You're always going to have these situations that arise that you need additional time to research the account or to earmark the account for a temporary hold category so that you don't move forward with collection actions and they don't automatically occur. And the same applies for those who are in the process of like selling their property, because once you provide that disclosure information, it's kind of a waiting game, before receiving the paperwork to do a transfer of ownership. I know I had more than one occasion where late fees were applied, that had to be waived because the property was, in the position of being sold. So I can't go back and retroactively get those fees. So it was just a lot of waiving fees. And I realized, how do I prevent this? So being able to have a resale status that is a hold status is a great way to ensure that you have enough time to receive the closing paperwork. Plus you can determine, how long and if the sale didn't go through, if it's been longer than like 90 days. And then for accounts where you have to monitor bankruptcies, seeing that on the status report when you're looking up accounts or when you're looking at reports, it's going to prevent any incorrect information or actions being taken on that account. And then, of course, being able to see the accounts that are on payment plan status is invaluable to managing them. And in thinking about this earlier today, it crossed my mind that you can really get creative with these. Consider having a payment plan request hold category, to track the ones that have requested but haven't been approved yet. And then, maybe a payment plan agreement status. So, hey, they already have an agreement in place. I just need to monitor it. Or additionally, you could have like a payment plan default category so that in your collection actions, if it requires a notice be mailed to them before you move it to the next collection action, that you can have that template letter attach and automatically populate for you. And then you can really even go one step further. In the last webinar, we talked about, having multiple payment plan options available. So you could have a status for each of the types that you are making available, a 3-month, a 6-month, a 12-month. And then it would be really easy from that report and from the drop down to pick which one you want, and you print your report and you can tell as you're going through collections, oh, that's my 12, that's my 12, this one's a short-term one. So really, it's up to you. There's a lot of options available, and really you can design it any way you want and to work for any of these situations. I like having that many options. So now let's look at how you can set up and assign accounts to your hold categories and your payment plan agreements throughout the month, because these aren't things that are going to, be managed in the actual collection cycle. These are going to be managed, in and out in an influx of, calls that come in or payment plan requests. So the question is, like, how do you do this efficiently? And additionally, resales are going to come in. So as you're doing them, as a request comes in, being able to create that status quickly and easily. And then the same, process for any other hold things. Someone calls in, there's a reason, my husband's in the hospital, I'm out of town, the dog ate the check, whatever it is, you can put a quick hold on there, a temporary hold status, put your notes in, and, be able to follow up with that. And the biggest problem I ran into was all of this worked prior to when I was doing it in Pro, but there was no way to, really see, okay, is this a temporary hold or is it a long-term hold? And I found that my collections person, after auditing it, had about 200 accounts on hold that shouldn't have been, just because they weren't managed efficiently. So that's where all this came from in digging into how to work this better. So here's a scenario, either you or one of your team members gets a call from an owner, they're disputing their balance. I'm sure all of you are very familiar with this example. With your hold categories configured, you would just simply search for the owner or address, and when on the property profile page, then you go to actions, choose to edit the property options, and there's your collection status drop down. You can choose from the selections that you originally set up, and then you've got all the options underneath. I can determine whether I want to, based on a case-by-case basis, or whether it's the association's policy. Do I hold late fees? Do I want to hold a collection notice? Do I want to hold payments being received, even AR statements? So you've got all the options right there under where you choose your new status. But after going through the steps of setting these statuses up to have examples for you today, I also realized a really cool way to utilize custom fields, and I really wanted to share this with you, because typically you would create your drop down and choose the status, but then how do you note it? You can go back, you can add a comment, but the flow didn't work for me. So I thought, what's a great way to solve this is to create the custom field, and I can pick what fields that I want it to have. So it's really powerful because I can move it around and have it display right under where I was making these other edits. So it's all right there, bam, bam, bam. You pick your status, you pick your options, and then you put your collection hold notes. And the example here, I just put a multi-line select where you can add different information. So it lets you add a couple of sentences in pretty easily. And then I thought, I need to know when I did it. So an update date. That way, when you're on the property or the owner's screen, you're going to see that information. So it's going to display pretty easily. But then one step further, you can create a custom report to pull all of the payment plan or hold notes into one Excel file, which would make it super easy to process your collections every month and look at those who are actually on a payment plan and see what they actually signed up for. So no need to go through or dig through your email or spend wasted time, because you've got that information where you need it. So how convenient is that? Again, being able to utilize all these different features in ways that nobody probably ever thought of is such a great feature for me. I mean, I was a Pro user for 11 years, but I love this flexibility that one has to customize things the way that I need them. So, with this feature being so convenient, keep in mind that anyone that talks to an owner can quickly see where the account is in the collection cycle. So all these hold accounts that you've got detailed out, it's going to be especially useful for like attorney actions, where you may have a policy where if somebody calls and they received an attorney notice, your team's not going to talk to them. That notice from the attorney says, you must call me. But what does the owner do? Doesn't call them, they call you. So as soon as you open that screen, you're talking to the owner, it's easy to see right at the top of the screen what status they're in. And so you can train your team to say, hey, if it's this, then you just redirect them right to, who they need to speak with. And then it's great to see things, like whether it's a home that's on a resale status, I know that it's selling, so I got to keep that top of mind. But, again, owners try to circumvent the process. So, arming your team with information and having it available quickly is so key to, really being efficient in the way that you're managing. Okay, so now that we have our action table ready and doing the heavy lifting for us, I'm going to tell you and really go through why it's critical not only to be prepared, but to also utilize technology to get your collections processed with ease. So first, reviewing the reports will help you have all the data that you need before you move through the collection cycle. And just a reminder that before you start, ensure to apply prepaids just in case any adjustments have been made that affect the balances. This is going to wash out the prepaids against that and make sure that, your balances are correct. And it's a really good practice to quickly review the action table, especially during the first, few months that you're doing this, to make sure it's configured the way that you need it. Make sure your template letters are assigned. All of your hold categories have been set up. And that way, when you process through the collections, you're going to be able to generate the letters and it's all going to run a lot smoother. So let's look at, how to get the most out of our data. So start with, reviewing collection accounts. I recommend first running your aged owner balance report and be sure to include the option for, the last payment. That's going to make it really easy to check quickly the people who are on that payment plan status to make sure they made a payment that month and to make sure that it's correct. And then this is when a custom report with the details of that payment plan that you can set up and enter when people, submit a payment plan agreement, set up a couple of custom fields, enter the data right there on the property account, and then run those custom reports. You've got it all right there. So lots of cool ways you can use the custom fields to be able to track all this data. And then also show the collection status on your report so you can see those accounts that are on hold, and then you can quickly review all of them. That way anybody that needs to be kicked off a hold can be easily done before you start to process your collections. And I like to export the report to Excel so that I can work with the data. And, I always got accustomed to adding an extra column for, putting my notes on as I'm going through them. So, hey, I'm kicking them off. They didn't make a payment, whatever it is. And then I would make a column for, okay, if this is where they were last time, here's what I'm going to move them to. So that when I went to categorize and process collections, it was easy to sort my report and just knock them off, directly in the software. So by working the report and making notes on any special circumstances, you'll speed up that collection process in one. And a bonus is you can use that report to provide to boards. It's a wonderful tool so that, for my boards, it prevented a lot of questions and, it had all the background documented. So it really helped out, in keeping them up to date on where we were in all the collections. All right, let's move on to looking at, how to review and, quickly move through our collection candidates. So once you get all your reports, you're going to come in, you're going to put your, as of date in, you're going to get a full list of all of the candidates. And then you've got a couple of sort options you can do, but typically you'll want to sort them by the collection action. So Then you can look down your list that you have already created, and if you need to edit any, you can hit the pencil, move them to another like collection step. But typically it should all fall in line except for those, outliers. So once I do that, run through this, I can quickly review it and then post. So, one of the things I love about that is just, being able to sort things in, especially in Excel, and being able to search things in TOPS 1 is so much more efficient, and you can easily get around and post things a lot quicker. And then a nice feature that you have available is being able to run these reports after you post them by the type of action. So if you click on first letter, second letter, it's going to let you have that separate report. And why that's important is if you're moving through the attorney actions within your cycle, you can print those reports specifically for the attorney, send them to them, and it's going to be a full list of the candidates you want to send a notice of lien or a demand letter to. So it just takes one more thing off of having to one by one put together a list or email for the attorney to utilize. And it's going to automatically update the notes on the account ledger. So one less thing for you to do. And then I always did a quick check of the report to ensure that my letters generated for each internal action. So if I had 10 late letters, I always verified that I had 10 notices print or email, whatever the option is that you guys opt in for it. Keep in mind too that our success team has access to a library of template letters that we've formatted for collections. So if you don't already have yours set up, feel free to reach out to us at success@topsoft.com. We're happy to share those with you. Anything to make your life easier, anything that's going to be beneficial, that's our job, is to help you succeed, help you, be more efficient and grow your company. And so now we're going to move into the questions and answers portion of our webinar. And I want to also say that, today's goal was really to review some of the cool features and different ways you can use the collections portion and the actions to be more efficient. But if you need more help on the how-tos, I should call them, step-by-steps, let us know. We've got a lot of webinars from our past office hours, and we're happy to send you those links if you need help on how to set up and how to learn how to use the features that are in there, whether it's template letters, whether it's setting up your collection process. Just let us know and we'll help you out on that end by sending you all those great resources. So I will open it up for Q&A and ask my team to help me out in answering some of these questions. Let me pop out the question section. Again, it's so small on the screen and I can't see well.
Well, you're good because at this moment we don't have any questions. Looks like you were able to help everybody out and take care of that.
Oh, well, awesome. You know what? That is always our, goal, is to give you guys as much information as we can. If you think of anything afterwards, after the webinar, or need anything from the success team, please feel free to reach out to us. Again, we're here for you. We're your advocate to help you utilize TOPS 1 to get the most out of your technology. So again, thank you all for attending, and I hope that you enjoy the rest of your day, and look forward to our next webinars, and sign up for our office hours if you have not already joined us on one of those. Appreciate you attending, everyone. Thanks so much.